BMW's M4. The name might not be familiar, but the driving experience certainly will be for fans of the Munich maker's motorsport division and the 4 generations of M3 models whose heritage this covetable coupe builds upon. Turbo technology features for the first time, but you can still have a manual gearbox, and as ever there's a convertible option for those who want it. However you like your M4 though, one thing's guaranteed: a proper driving experience. We live in the time of the turbo. Every modern engine, it seems, has to have one, even those in cars with whole reputations formed on revvy, normally aspirated power. Cars like this one, BMW's M4. The name may be unfamiliar, but if you're seriously interested in this model, then you'll probably be well aware that its heritage lies in an unbroken line of M3 models dating all the way back to 1985. Now this is effectively the 5th generation version, but as all mid-sized BMW coupe and convertibles must now wear 4 designated badges, M4 it has to be, though the M3 name has been retained by this mechanically identical saloon version. Either way, as I suggested at the beginning, you'll have to get used to the fact that the engine recipe is very different this time round. The Mark IV design's 4-litre normally aspirated V8 replaced by the first turbo engine ever seen in this iconic model line. In fact, it's a twin turbo unit, potent enough to overcome this power plant's smaller 6-cylinder 3-litre size and boost power by 11 brake horsepower and torque by an astonishing 35%. One thing, though, hasn't changed, namely the fact that here the M Motorsport badges actually mean something. BMW's competition division is closely involved in this car's development as they have been in all its predecessors. Those older models were all raw, uncompromising driving machines, racers for the road. The question is whether such a thing can still exist in this very different era, where frantic speed and frugal sense must somehow combine, no matter how extreme the performance pretensions of the product. Let's put this car to the test. So, what's this M4 really like? Well, like no other 4 Series coupe, that's for sure. You realise this as soon as you hit the start button and the twin-turbo straight-6 engine fires up with a throaty roar. The noise may not be quite as emotive as the revvy V8 used in this M4's direct E90 series predecessor, but it'll still alert the neighbours to the fact that something rather special is sitting on your driveway. I've always thought of M cars of this kind as being particularly suited to 6-cylinder power, and indeed both 2nd and 3rd generation E36 and E46 model M3s had it, though in normally aspirated form. Adding twin turbos to that configuration has a predictably huge impact, powering this 5th generation model not only past those 2 old stages, but also past the Mark IV V8 version it replaced. Not only has outright power risen over that car from 414 to 425 brake horsepower, but more significantly, torque has increased by a massive 35%, and that makes all the difference. With a big, normally aspirated engine fitted up front, the previous generation version of this model required selection of a lower gear for instant acceleration below 4,000 RPM, so you constantly had to keep the engine spinning, which was fun if you were in the mood, but a little tiring if you weren't. Now, thanks to 550 Newton meters of pulling power this time round, that's not necessary here. You simply plant your foot in almost any gear, and it goes very fast. 50 to 75 miles an hour in 4th, occupying just 3.5 seconds in the manual model and 4.2 seconds in this auto version. True, there isn't the razor-sharp throttle response you only get from normally aspirated induction, and I rather miss that, but turbo lag is slight, and once the blowers have spooled up, they're your passport to absolutely ridiculous speed. How much speed? Well, I'm going to try and demonstrate. Here I've got the MDCT twin-clutch auto version that almost all buyers choose, though unlike Mercedes and Audi models in this segment, BMW does still give buyers a manual stick-shift option. I can see why most people want the auto, though, with its so-called drive logic technology. You can either use it as a conventional automatic in drive mode, or switch into sequential mode and do the changes yourself, either with the stick or with steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. Now, there's also the option of changing the ferocity of the shift speed using this button at the base of the gear stick. You'll need maximum ferocity selected if you're to play with the MDCT transmission's other party piece, launch control. Let's stop and try it. You disconnect the dynamic stability control, click into sequential mode with that maximum shift speed showing, then brake, floor the throttle, release the anchors, and wait for all hell to break loose. And when it does, 62 miles an hour from rest flashes by in just 4.1 seconds, a couple of tenths quicker than the manual version can manage. If you were to keep your right boot buried, this car would flash past the 100 mile an hour mark in just 8.8 seconds, then keep going to an artificially limited 156 mile an hour maximum that could be extended to 170 miles an hour if you were to pay your dealer to tweak the engine software. In other words, there's not much between this and a proper supercar class model, like, say, Porsche's 911 GT3. It's certainly quick enough to show an early Lamborghini Gallardo a clean pair of heels. So yes, it's properly, thrillingly fast, and one of those cars that can leave you a little white-faced if you deploy the full quota of horsepower on a road that might be a little narrow or bumpy. In a straight line on a decent surface, though, you can enjoy the almost relentless acceleration to the full. And the soundtrack's great, too. Okay, so there's a measure of cheating going on here with some artificial audio being piped through the car's speakers. But although that might have the purists up in arms, I don't really have too much of a problem with it. Progress and all that. Talking of progress, well, there's plenty on display here. The kind of Luddites who object to things like the piped engine note and the MDCT gearbox will also probably find fault with the adoption of electrically assisted power steering. Predictably, they're wrong again. The rack fitted to this car is sharply accurate, and the integrated M-Servotronic function electronically adjusts the level of steering assistance depending on the car's speed. The system offers the driver 3 modes as standard, with Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus options. I like the most aggressive setting. You make your choice from this Servotronic button down here by the gear stick. They're as part of a cluster of 3 switches that together replace the cruder drive performance control system BMW fits to its lesser models. Directly above the Servotronic button, there's one for EDC electronic damper control, so you can adjust the rider quality and suspension stiffness. And above that, there's an M-Engine Dynamics control button to adjust throttle response from laid back to ferocious. Now, with the damping, the options are the same as those for the steering, so you get Comfort, Sport and Sport Plus. But with the throttle response, the options are Efficient, Sport and Sport Plus. Truth to tell, though, I have to say that in day-to-day use of this car, I reckon that you'll hardly ever need to use these switches. That's because your 2 most favoured mode combinations can be stored as one-shot selections via these useful M1 and M2 buttons. Here, for instance, I've got my favourite fast road settings stored in M1. That's steering Sport, throttle sport and suspension comfort. And my favourite track settings stored in M2. That means everything's set to Sport Plus. Your gear shift speed preference can also be stored with these. I should perhaps point out that the Sport Plus settings really are designed for perfectly surfaced track use only. Like me though, you'll probably want to try them out anyway, just to see. The other aspect of this car that sets it apart from many of its rivals is the Active M differential. This electronically controlled multi-plate limited slip differential links up with the DSC dynamic stability control system and does its best to harness all that power and torque. Any impending loss of traction on one side of the car is identified at an early stage, and anything between 0 and 100% differential lock can be applied within a fraction of a second. This means that wheel spin is prevented on slippery surfaces or in instances where the right and left rear wheel have widely differing amounts of grip. It also helps hugely through tight bends when the car's being thrown from lock to lock. Before finishing, I should certainly mention the brakes, always a crucial part of any proper performance car's repertoire. When I used to drive previous generation versions of this model around the old Nürburgring Nordschleife, this was always the part of the car that I found slightly disappointing. Things have changed though, and the standard stoppers are very good in normal fast road use. Many serious drivers though will want to consider upgrading to the optional carbon ceramic discs that I'm trying here. Or at least they will until they see just how much specifying these will add to the cost of their cars. If you've regular track day attendance in mind for this BMW though, it'll be money well spent. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that it'd be a crime to buy this machine and never take it to a track, for almost every part of the design has been completed with circuit driving in mind. Even the oil supply system has been designed for track use, complete with a special cover that limits the movement of oil under the effect of strong acceleration or lateral G-loading. Overall, there's no doubt that this remains the proper driver's tool its predecessors always were. It's not as light and chuckable as those earlier M cars, weighing in at 1,500 kilograms. It can never be. But then BMW makes a M235i model you should try if that's more the kind of thing that you're seeking. The M4 has moved on, but kept the spirit of the original. Is this how buyers will want their M car to look? Probably. The 4 Series Coupe is a smart piece of styling. Here, though, it's also become a rather menacing thing, sitting 47mm lower to the ground than its M3 saloon stablemate and offering a feeling of real width in its design, especially when you view from the front end and take in the wider flared wheel arches, the characteristic power dome on the classic long bonnet, and the way the deep front spoiler with its trio of air intakes sits purposefully beneath the trademark double-slat kidney grille. These unique aerodynamically optimised twin-stalk side mirrors with their translucent LED indicators are bespoke too. Moving round to the side, you'll spot other M4 keynotes like these M-model vents cut into front wings that integrate so-called air breathers there to link up to the aero curtains in the front apron and help optimise the airflow around the wheel arches. There are squat rear haunches that simply yell front engine rear drive to those in the know, and they shroud wheels that are 19 inches as standard and finished in ferric grey, or as an option, as here, can be supplied with a jet black finish. It's the roof, though, that'll probably excite most comment amongst your friends. It's made of carbon fibre reinforced plastic, and BMW denies it's a styling flourish, contending instead that it's there to save 6 kilos of weight and thereby lower this car's centre of gravity. Yeah, right. Weight saving, indeed, is a key theme throughout this M4. Compared to the last V8 M3 Coupe, we're talking of a car that's around 80 kilograms lighter, and one that's been helped to that figure with trick features like a carbon drive shaft, a carbon prop shaft, and lots of aluminium bits in both the suspension and in certain parts of the body, like the front wings and the bonnet. Moving back to the rear, you'll find a boot lid that can also be finished in carbon fibre, featuring a tidy integrated rear spoiler that takes its cues from the legendary E46 series M3 CSL of 2003. And to finish things off, there's a high-gloss set of quad exhaust tailpipes, framed by this sculptural rear apron with its integrated diffuser. Looks great, doesn't it? Predictably, the M4 convertible model is even more stylish, provided you've retracted its metal folding top, a process that occupies 20 seconds. Whatever your choice of body shape, inside you'll be greeted by an intuitively designed cockpit, the centrepiece of which is the M leather steering wheel with its M drive buttons for personalised vehicle setup. On M double-clutch transmission models like this one, you also get gear shift paddles with a cool metal finish. Through the stitched wheel, you glimpse a purposeful set of motorsport-derived dials, with a segment beneath the rev counter showing the various suspension, throttle and steering setup options that you've chosen. Most buyers will also want to specify the head-up display I have here that projects key driving information onto the bottom of the windscreen and reverts to a special M display when you activate one of the M drive buttons. I think the deep-set, leather-trimmed, heated, electrically adjustable M seats are my favourite interior touch, though, with their contoured sides, integrated headrests and pronounced raised elements. The stitching and perforation is a nice touch too, as is the illuminated BMW M logo. Otherwise, the dashboard is pretty much as you'd find it in any M Sport trimmed BMW 3 or 4 Series model. Does it have the sense of sheer occasion you'd find in a Mercedes or an Audi? Well, probably not, but then this is a working, driving environment, not a purely luxurious one. And it all works so well, the main dials in particular, a model of clarity. I particularly like the easy access to the climate and stereo controls that doesn't require you having to root around in sub-menus on an infotainment touchscreen. You don't get one of those here, and you don't need it, because BMW's iDrive system now works so well, even if its screen isn't quite as well integrated into the dash layout as, say, you'll find with the Audi MMI setup. Now, there's a lot on here, from maintenance schedules to visual handbook representations and the many varied and mainly optional functions that make up the Munich maker's connected drive system. And it's all very easy to find, particularly with a larger rotary controller that's part of the BMW professional setup that comes as standard. Getting into the back isn't the easiest task in the world, and once you're snuggled in there on sculpted seats made from a lightweight composite material, you'll find a slightly strange combination of decent legroom but rather pinched headroom. The extra 50mm of wheelbase this car enjoys over its M3 Coupe predecessor really tells here, freeing up 13mm more stretching room for your lower limbs. Unfortunately, the lowering of the roofline by 16mm that's been necessary to achieve those slinky looks will see taller folk grazing their scalps on the headlining. Still, assuming that they're not sat behind a couple of basketball players, most adults will be fine back here on all but the longest trips. There'll be reasonable room for their luggage too, and you've the option to specify a comfort access feature that allows you to open the boot lid by swiping your foot beneath the bumper if, key in pocket, you approach the car laden down with bags. Once open, it reveals a large but shallow 445-litre space that probably does quite well to get within a whisker of the cargo capacity of slightly frumpier-looking rivals. And you can extend it with these useful split-folding rear backrests that may save you the delivery charge the next time you can't resist the latest flat-pack furniture promotion. That won't be so much of an option if you go for the M4 convertible. With that car, the luggage capacity isn't too bad with the roof up. In that configuration, there's 370 litres of space. Retract the roof though, and the folded metal sandwich of panels just eats into the luggage area, reducing it to just 220 litres. So, what can you expect to pay for this car? Well, at launch, prices started around the £57,000 price point. But since over 90% of buyers opt to pay the extra £2,500 for the MDCT twin-clutch automatic gearbox, it's probably more accurate to think of this model as being a £60,000 car. I should also mention that there's a premium of around £4,000 if you want the folding metal-roofed convertible version. But whichever body style you choose, there aren't really many direct rivals. As far as the Coupe M4 model is concerned, the four I would pick out all cost around the same as this BMW and all have attractions and drawbacks. If you're familiar with this segment of the market, the model you'll probably think of first as an M4 rival is the revitalised Mercedes-AMG C63, which is a little more powerful and a little more efficient, but also a little less rewarding to drive. It's automatic only too, as are coupes like Audi's RS5 and Lexus's RCF. These rivals, like the Mercedes, being V8 powered, though they're not anything like as efficient as the C63 or as dynamic. At least the Audi has quattro four-wheel drive though. Finally, if I was seriously looking at this BMW, I'd also be seriously looking at Porsche's Cayman GTS. Here, you're certainly served up a more overt sports car driving experience, but you'd have to run a Cayman alongside something more practical for the ownership proposition to really work. If, having considered all of that, you conclude that it is this BMW M4 that you really want, then you're probably going to need to know just how generous BMW has been with the standard spec. And the answer is that a surprisingly complete tally is included in the upfront price. The M light alloy M double spoke 19-inch wheels, the carbon fibre style roof and the high gloss shadow line exterior trim with its discreet integrated M rear spoiler all mark this car out from any humbler M Sport trimmed 4 Series coupe, even to those failing to notice either the discreet badgework or the quad chromed exhausts. Under the skin, of course, there's the active M differential and inside the M Drive Manager system so that you can choose driving settings that'll help you make the most of it. There are also lightweight M-specific merino leather-trimmed heated front seats with integrated headrests and illuminated logos. These motorsport-style chairs place you perfectly in front of a lovely M multifunction 3-spoke stitched leather sport steering wheel through which you view a purposeful M instrument cluster. Other standard features include xenon headlamps, cruise control with a brake function, auto headlamps and wipers, front and rear park distance control sensors, a high-quality DAB stereo and a choice of unique metallic paint colours. Another key inclusive part of the M4 package is BMW's professional navigation system with its sharp graphics, 3D map views and smart iDrive touch controller which can offer a pad for writing text or using a cursor on an interactive map. The navigation setup can also divert you around jams with real-time traffic information, and you'll want to make use of BMW's online services, which give access to current localised information, such as weather and news, as well as providing an online search feature and helpful office functions. There are also the latest infotainment features like full speech recognition and voice control with message dictation function. And that's just the start. Delve deeper into the infotainment possibilities of this model and you'll find yourself getting familiar with a wide range of BMW connected drive services that aim to offer a whole series of information, entertainment and service features, including unlimited access to smartphone apps such as BMW Connected. Plus there's web radio access to social networking and the Google Center Car system, so that you can plan your route beforehand on your PC, then remotely forward it to your vehicle. You'll have access to various BMW apps too, including my favourite one, a free remote app that enables you to remotely lock or unlock your car if you lose your keys. Also included within the Connected Drive package is BMW's emergency call system, which will automatically summon help after an accident, alerting the emergency services to your exact GPS location. Could be a lifesaver. Other more familiar standard safety features include ISOFIX child seat fastenings, a tyre puncture warning system, the usual twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus all kinds of electronic acronyms to hopefully ensure that you'll never have to use them. Switchable DSC dynamic stability control, of course, which, when disconnected, activates an electronic limited slip function for the rear differential to help through spirited cornering. If all that's a bit too wild for you, then just settle back and leave the ASC automatic stability control and DTC dynamic traction control systems to take care of things. The ABS braking setup is aided by DBC dynamic brake control and CBC cornering brake control. Plus there's a brake drying function to ensure that even in the wet, the disc is optimally effective. Safety options include lane change and lane departure warning systems that'll warn you of a potential collision when changing lanes. Then there's the Driving Assistant Plus setup, which warns of a looming collision with a pedestrian. You might also spend extra on a more advanced active cruise control system. High beam assistant headlamps that dip themselves in the face of oncoming traffic at night, and adaptive full LED headlights that turn with the bends and illuminate junctions as you go. So we've covered the things you get as standard, and the kind of features you could specify if you're feeling virtuous and safety conscious. But what about the kind of extra cost items that'll really make the M-Car ownership experience that bit more special? Well, as you'd expect, there are plenty of those. On a cosmetic level, you can delve into the BMW individual catalogue for special paint finishes, leather upholstery options and custom interior trim elements that will offer a really personalised look and feel to your car. But before getting into all of that, I'd want to think about the kind of performance model this is and specify it to suit. So I'd want features like the speed limit display, able to tell you what the current limit is on any road at any given time. Perfect for avoiding those heart-stopping moments when you're approaching a speed camera and genuinely have no clue what the limit is. Ideally, you'd want this to show up on the optional M head-up display, which projects key information onto the bottom of the windscreen so that you don't have to take your eyes off the road. In an M-Car model, this feature comes with additional functions such as a gear display, rev counter and optimum shift indicator. What you won't have to pay extra for is the clever BMW M lap timer app. Ideal for those looking to get the best out of their M-Car on track and there to allow owners to analyse their personal driving style. Once their smartphone is hooked up to the car via either a USB cable or the snap-in adapter that can be provided, customers can operate the lap timer app by using the iDrive controller. The app then records data such as speed, longitudinal and lateral acceleration, engine revs, the gear engaged, steering angle, accelerator position and fuel consumption. Afterwards, you can nerd out to your heart's content, analysing all of these graphs on your smartphone. You can even see driver reaction speed and allow two recordings on the same circuit to be compared corner by corner. The readings can either be your own or ones shared by email. You're going to need to be a track fiend to want to shell out for the most expensive item on the options list for this car, the M Carbon ceramic brakes, identifiable by smart gold calipers. These exhibit quite awesome fade-free stopping power, but then they should do given an asking price that equates to around 10% of the price of the whole car. It's probably not the biggest surprise in the world that shifting from the normally aspirated 4-litre V8 provided in the previous generation version of this car to the turbocharged 3-litre straight-six used here brings with it all kinds of efficiency benefits. Perhaps it's a bigger measure of BMW's achievement to say that they've developed a more powerful engine with 35% more torque, yet the combined fuel economy figure is 25% better than before, produced from a motor that's fully Euro 6 compliant. The actual numbers are 34 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and emissions of 194 grams per kilometre. Both of those figures achieved with the MDCT dual-clutch auto transmission that I'm using here. If you want to stir the stick yourself with a manual model, those returns worsen a little, emissions being rated a whole tax band higher at 204 grams per kilometre, with the corresponding economy figure edging down to 32.1 miles per gallon. For the M4 convertible, the figures are 32.5 miles to the gallon and 203 grams per kilometre with the MDCT gearbox, and 31.0 miles per gallon and 213 grams per kilometre with the manual stick shift. True, these returns do lag slightly behind those of a comparable Mercedes-AMG C63, but not by much, and both cars are much closer than you'd expect they would be to the figures of a smaller, lighter, purebred sports car rival like Porsche's Cayman GTS. So, while the Porsche would cost you 125 pence per mile to run, this BMW comes in at 133.5 pence per mile. That's predictably far better than more traditionally engined V8 competitors can manage, cars like Lexus's RCF Coupe or Jaguar's XFR Saloon. Such are the advantages of engine downsizing, particularly when, as here, they're combined with the fruits of BMW's efficient dynamics technology. This includes features like electromechanical power steering, auto stop-start, brake energy recuperation, on-demand control of engine ancillary components. You also get improved aerodynamics and reduced weight. As a result of all this, you get a set of overall running costs that mean owning this car need not be the willful act of huge extravagance it might at first seem. After all, residual values are also very strong, and other ongoing costs such as servicing aren't exorbitant. Yes, you will ramp up bigger bills if you use your right boot in anger a good percentage of the time and chew through consumables like tyres and brake pads, but that's the same for any car in this price bracket. In fact, this M-car's focus on weight saving means it's actually a good deal easier on its tyres and brakes than a comparable Audi RS or Mercedes C63 AMG model. So, how can I sum all of this up? Well, it's certainly interesting to note that unlike its direct M3 predecessors, this M4 is being built in exactly the same factory on Munich's Preußenstrasse that was used to construct the car that started this iconic model line back in 1985, the E30 M3 Coupe. That fact apart, though, there's not actually a lot of commonality between that original and its modern-day interpretation. The focus has changed from a raw, track-tamed screamer to something a lot more measured. Don't get me wrong, the M4 is still hugely thrilling, even if you invoke just 50% of its capability. Its agenda, though, has changed. If you were one of those who had a poster of an E30 M3 on your bedroom wall back in the 80s, then the mature adult in you would probably find that car too wearing now. Instead, you'd want something like this. That's where the M4 is so clever. It's taken its customers with it, understanding that people spending this sort of money on a sports coupe don't necessarily want something that'll bite back, give them the shakes and necessitate a trip to the chiropractors. It helps, of course, that BMW has backfilled its M-series range, offering the M235i for those who really do want something smaller, lighter and angrier. That certainly allowed this M4 to be a much larger vehicle with a roadway footprint now bigger than the original M6 model. But don't take that to mean that it's turned from raw racer into some kind of sporting GT. The mean streak's still there. It's just better disguised when not required. Are there drawbacks? Well, steering and throttle response aren't quite as sharp as they were in this model's predecessor, nor is the engine note quite as memorable. Many will feel, though, that these are small prices to pay for the much bigger benefits offered elsewhere, and the fact that this still remains the most exciting and involving car of its kind. Even its closest rival, the Mercedes-AMG C63, can't come close to this M4's agility and driver feedback. So yes, if this is progress, I'll take it. As here, in Austin Yellow Metallic, with the twin-clutch gearbox, the head-up display and a set of carbon brakes. I'd better start saving.